So Alex, what is the IDFA and why is it crucially important? Or why was it crucially important?
Yeah, it's great. So very, very simply, IDFA stands for the ID for advertising. There's also, it's something that Apple created. It's an API they opened up. I think it was introduced primarily to try to get away from people using the previous more scary IDs, which were things like IMEI and other things. The cool new feature about it when it was introduced years ago was that it was resettable by the user and therefore gave the user some control over how, other companies could use it, and then they could clear it similar to how they can clear cookies. The characteristic that's very distinct and valuable about it is that it's accessible and the same, constant, uniform across all apps on the same device. And so if you are in a social networking app, you can read an IDFA on a device. If you're in some gaming app or an e-commerce app, you'll read the exact same value. And therefore, what it does is create a common language for all apps on the device to reference that device when communicating about attribution or advertising targeting or whatever. So the main thing is just common and accessible across all apps.
Well, so what exactly did Apple announce at WWDC a couple of weeks ago? I mean, they didn't actually kill IDFA as expected, but I mean, they essentially did the same thing with what moves they made. So just lay it out for us.
The announcement that they made was that as starting with iOS 14, the IDFA would be inaccessible by default. The specific language is that there's a flag you can set as a user called limit ad tracking. If limit ad tracking is set to true, then if you try to read that value in one of those apps, like the gaming app or social network app or e-commerce app, it's all zeroed out. So by default, upon a new instance of an app, it's set to true. So all of that IDFA is inaccessible. And then in order to access it, you must prompt a user with, and I'm sure everybody's seen this by now, you must prompt a user with some absolutely terrifying language that says that they're gonna, this app wants to track you all over the internet and do terrible things with your data and, and harm you in ways that you can't even imagine. And then you get you can control like a small subtext at the bottom that's like, just a slight shade of gray, darker than the actual background itself to communicate a personal message about why you're asking that. And so if you can somehow convince a user to get past that, only then will you have access to the IDFA. And so, well, I don't know if you want to go in, but I can definitely wax on why I think that is the end of the IDFA.
Well, so I mean, in essence, starting with iOS 14, developers have to get opt-in consent for using the IDFA. And then the flip side of that is that this pretty much means that limit ad tracking is just on by default, unless there's an opt-in, right?
Exactly.